Welcome, everybody. It is Business Monday here at GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO of GoLocal. This is Jeff Grybowski from Deepwater Wind, Ørsted, retired. Did I cover it all?
Oh, I'm not retired yet, Josh, but I'm no longer at those companies. That's fair to say.
Okay, so let's go back in time.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting businesses ever developed in Rhode Island, it's right up there with Slater Mill and things like that, you created over a 11, 12-year period.
11 years, yeah.
11 years, the first offshore wind project in the United States.
Right. Yeah, it was an overnight success. It only took 11 years. Obviously, when we started in 2008 with the company, we frankly didn't expect it to take off the way it really did. We were very hopeful that we could build this project, and frankly, we didn't know really where it would go. We had a lot of expectations, and we were very excited about the potential for this new technology. But the reality is, I thought it would take more like 20, 25 years for it to really blossom. But the reality is that it's been accelerated by probably about a whole decade. So it's really taken off in the last just handful of years.
Did you think you'd have to do other renewable projects onshore, maybe solar or wind onshore to help sort of fund and develop the IP?
We actually started developing some solar projects a handful of years ago because we thought offshore wind would take so long that we needed to frankly fill in the gap between projects because these projects are offshore they're big, they're complicated. The permitting can take 5 or 6 years to get through. So I decided that we should maybe fill the trough in with some solar projects to keep the staff busy and generate some revenue. And we had some success doing solar. But then offshore wind really started to pick up again, and we went from Block Island to the second project, to the third project, to the fourth project much faster than I anticipated. So frankly, we then pulled back off of solar and really doubled down on offshore wind.
Now, if I get the years wrong, but around 13-ish, it looked like Block Island could go either way.
Yeah, it was 2012, 2013. We were right in the thick of trying to get all those things that you need to make a project work: the permitting, the cable landing,
and that was the
complicated
big complexity, right? It was the connectivity to the cable landing.
Yeah, the funny thing is that when you're building an offshore wind farm, it obviously is big. It's a big engineering challenge, but the building of it offshore is not the most complicated part. It's actually the easiest part of the business because there are lots of wind farms in the water. And there are lots of offshore oil rigs, for instance.
Right.
And those are really big structures that we build offshore. So there's a whole industry with lots and lots of experience on how to build things offshore. So that actually is the easier part. The real hard part is getting all the government approvals that you need, working with all the other people who use the ocean, your neighbors, whether it might be fishermen or environmental advocates. And then you've got to find a place.
Seals.
Yeah, right. Whales.
Whales.
It's whales.
Seals permit.
But then you've got to find a place to land this cable. And when you land the cable, now you're on shore.
Right.
And now you're in someone's backyard potentially. And then you've got to snake that cable to a substation that's also on shore. And now you're dealing with dozens of property owners in local towns, and that's where the complications start.
And link chafing never got enough credit for actually finding the sneaky little way to get the whole thing connected.
Governor Chafee was instrumental in the success of the Block Island project, you're right, because we eventually negotiated an agreement with the state under Governor Chafee's administration to land the cable at Scarborough State Beach.
Right.
Actually, a part of the state beach that is on the northernmost part of Scarborough, where not a whole lot of people tend to go on that very, very northern part of the beach. There's actually, where our cable lands, there's an outflow, a water outflow pipe. And it's actually part of the beach that some people call Stinky Beach. So because it's right near the outflow, so it's really far away from most beach.
So the key to your success in developing the first offshore wind project was aligning your cables with Stinky Beach.
Pretty much, yeah. That's a decent summary.
Okay, so Block Island happens, and then you guys start bidding like mad people on potential leases.
2016, Block Island goes into operation, and then we start working on the next couple projects. And we were successful 2 in a row. We got a contract with the Long Island Power Authority, which supplies all the power for all of Long Island, which is a massive population center. Millions and millions of people live on Long Island, obviously. And the Long Island Power Authority agreed to build what is now going to be a 130 megawatt project. So, it's more than 4 times the size of Block Island. And then shortly after that, we were very successful down in Maryland on a project that's over 200 megawatts. So Block Island led to 2 other successes pretty closely. And those are the next 2 projects that will likely be built in the United States.
And the Long Island one comes in the South Fork, correct?
It goes to the South Fork of Long Island, exactly. It goes right into the Hamptons.
Yep. And I'm sure they're glad to have some nice renewable energy.
Well, yeah, with really strong support in the Hamptons for renewables, and they have a real dire energy need out there. If you think of Long Island, it really is just a long, skinny island,
Yeah.
and all the power is out west, but the population growth is out on the east. So it's really hard to build new power plants or substations on the eastern part
And you
of Long
need to be
Island.
on the South Fork rather than the North Fork. The North Fork is sort of the top of the alligator's mouth.
Yeah, it's far
which is
less
where
populated.
It's where the wind is, where the wineries are.
That's right.
But it's also in between the Connecticut, and
That's
there's not
right.
as much wind, I assume, on the north.
Well, there's a bigger population growth in the South Fork. It's more densely populated. You're right. There's on the North Fork, you've got a lot of those wineries and
Yeah.
a lot of cool farmland, but not a whole lot of people.
So Maryland's another one, and then you win some contracts, win some joint enterprises in Massachusetts,
in
Rhode Island, and Connecticut.
Yeah, and then right before, in the last few months, what I was working on at Ørsted was the competitions that were happening in New York and New Jersey for offshore wind, and the company was successful in both of those competitions. So wins in Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Maryland.
Not a bad run.
It was a good run. It was a good run.
And what's your takeaway? You just left last week.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming in. As you reflect back this weekend while lounging by the pool, drinking a pina colada or whatever it was, what's your thought process?
Yeah. Well, I'm struck by, as I said, how quickly this all happened, and it's really, a good indicator of what's happening in the larger world here in the energy business. So much is changing so quickly, and even if you, just look at what's happening in your home. A lot of people have smart homes now, right? Whether it's a smart light bulb, you can control that light bulb no matter where you are. And some of them know whether you're even in the room and will shut off if you're not there.
Right.
So the way we're using energy is dramatically changing. The way we're producing energy is dramatically changing. And this offshore wind business, it's growing, is actually just a small piece of what's happening in the larger kind of revolution of the energy business.
So when I graduated from college, I went to work for 2 very strong environmentalists, George Mitchell from Maine and John Chafee from Rhode Island, in the United States Senate. And the idea ever that commercialization of solar and wind would be as vibrant and price competitive as it is now was the ultimate dream. But yet, the public support, especially for onshore in the United States, different in Europe and other countries, has this disconnect.
Yeah.
What's the disconnect? What's fueled it? Is it the failure of the industry to kind of spend the money and do the education and take the time, or is it just the reality of a good economy and not in my backyard becomes the most dominant? I mean, your first competitor, Cape Wind, really got bogged down because a series of affluent, one of the Koch brothers, Walter Cronkite and Ted Kennedy, slowed them down.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, wind and solar today in a lot of parts of the country are the most competitive new energy resources. The legislature in Ohio just passed a piece of legislation subsidizing coal plants because they're getting beat out by wind and solar. So that's where we're headed, where coal is going away because it's economically uncompetitive, right? And we're going to see that happen more and more.
I thought it was dirty and cheap. That was the old...
They're dirty and cheap.
Yeah, dirty
So the
and
world
cheap.
is changing, and I think, like anything else, it's changing probably faster than people can keep track of, because we're used to thinking, well, wind and solar, they're heavily subsidized, they're really expensive. Well, they were 10, 20 years ago. The subsidies are largely gone away, and for the most part, wind and solar can compete in huge swaths of the country, and it's happening overnight.
And is it, we just saw last winter, it exposed the vulnerability of the Rhode Island's energy structure. The New York Times had a piece, Rhode Island is the highest or second highest for the where its electricity is coming. 94% of it from natural gas produced outside of Rhode Island.
Right.
Newport gets shut down. Newport and Middletown get shut down for 10 days, 2 weeks in the middle of the winter. How do we balance those things and educate folks? You go to Europe, you could be absolutely anywhere and look out and see wind projects.
Yeah. Well, if you also will go to Europe and largely see most of your power cables buried.
Yeah.
Right. That's the other thing. They've invested in their electric grid much more than we have. Our electric grid was built over 100 years ago, piecemeal.
Yeah.
Starting in Manhattan, Thomas Edison and the very first electric grids, and we built it piecemeal over time. And like a lot of things, we're not good at investing in infrastructure in the United States.
Really? I didn't know that.
Roads, bridges, but the electric grid is another one of them. And that modernization effort is critical because things like brownouts and blackouts in parts of the grid like Newport, which as an island, has to rely on importing their power from other parts of New England. Rhode Island is the same. Rhode Island relies on power coming from other parts of New England as well. And if a substation goes out in one part of the state, lots of people can lose power. We don't have a lot of redundancy in some parts of the state. But that's changing as we're investing in new types of grid technologies. Smart grids are helping us better control power. It's going to take time, but it's a huge sort of invisible infrastructure investment that's just beginning to happen.
Could we leap over? I'll give you an example. In Africa, everybody uses a cell phone. They really never put in telephone wires, so there was almost an advantage to it. Could we jump over some of these infrastructure costs by having better microgrids on leveraging battery storage? That allows us to be far more flexible, deliver energy right when it's needed, rather than this haphazard structure.
Interestingly, we probably could. That's I think you hit on it. The combination of storage, and there are lots of different types of storage technologies, and smarter grids coupled with smarter users, whether it's people or the products that people are using. I think that will help. We will see over the next decade a continued acceleration of the adoption of those technologies, and it will really change people's lives. It will make energy cheaper, it'll be more usable, and we're going to clean up the environment when we adopt these.
You grew up in Cumberland.
I did, yeah.
Did you go to Cumberland High School?
I did. I went to Cumberland High
School.
1989.
When you were sitting there in
Cumberland Clipper.
Classroom 1A or whatever you were in.
I foresaw all of this, Josh, from back then. I did.
Really?
I did.
That level of visionary.
I knew it was going to be offshore wind back there in 1989.
Did you scribble the Citibank ad in your? And I'm going to stand here on Block Island. Talk a little bit about it. I mean, life takes so many twists and turns. When did it become that you saw a place in transforming this? And then we'll get to what's next.
Yeah. Well, I was a regulatory lawyer and corporate lawyer, and was interested in all those places where big projects need to deal with the government and the public, and they have to go through regulatory agencies and get permits. This is the kind of stuff I liked figuring out because they're really complicated. They're really huge challenges. So I like those big, meaty, challenging kind of projects. And when offshore wind came along, and I began working on it as a lawyer, it struck me as I began to deal with people in the business that this really could be the next big thing. It really could be right on, we could just be on the edge of this taking off.
Because you had a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
They were all geeky engineers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But literally.
That's right.
They were all geeky engineers.
And that was my place.
Yeah.
Right. And so those geeky engineers who figured out the best place to put a wind turbine and how to build it and construct it and connect it to the grid needed help dealing with other human beings. Right?
We've all worked with
and they even needed
really
help dealing with each other, right? And So as CEO, I spent 50% of my time getting engineers to talk to each other, right? And getting engineers to be reasonable human beings.
When did you know that this had hit the tipping point? Was
Yeah.
it Block Island turning on? Was
Yeah.
it before that?
Yeah. When Block Island when we finally flipped the switch and the turbine started to spin.
Did you have any fear that they wouldn't turn on?
No, I didn't have a feel that they wouldn't. Well, you're never quite sure until you actually see them spin and
Right.
everything goes well. But GE's turbines are great.
Yeah.
GE's a great company. But when Block Island finally went into operation and I witnessed them spinning in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, that's the moment that I thought, all right, this is actually going to happen. It's not theoretical. This is no longer just an exercise on paper. This is a real thing, and it's going to happen.
So you've been retired for 5-6 days now. You left last
Yep.
Tuesday.
I'm on sabbatical.
You're on sabbatical.
Yeah.
You're going to have you told me in the green room, you're going to have a Rhode Island summer.
A Rhode Island summer for the
staycation.
first time in a very, very long time.
This is good news for Dell's lemonade guys, right? Invest. Don't short Dell's.
Maybe Narragansett beer as well. I don't know.
Narragansett beer. After that, what's next?
Well, I'm going to spend the next few months really digging into some ideas that I've had for a while and talking to a bunch of folks who have lots of other interesting ideas in the energy business principally. And I'll see whether one or more of them get some traction. Because I do think there are lots of opportunities, as I said, in this new energy business. Everything is changing on the supply side, how we produce power, on the demand side, how we use it, and then in the place where they come together in the grid. Lots of fascinating new businesses, great opportunities, and who knows, maybe there's actually a business in there somewhere.
And where do you judge? You now work with a number of states.
Yeah.
How's Rhode Island doing from an energy policy standpoint? What's its strengths and what else does it need to do?
Yeah. When it comes to energy policy, a lot is dictated by geography. You've got to start with geography, right?
Right.
Because a state can only really do what its geography allows it to do. So we don't have hydroelectric dams,
Yeah,
right?
hydro's not going to really.
We don't have hydro dams.
Right.
And building a hydro line from Canada, well, it's a really big, complicated thing, and a number of them have failed. So you've got to take advantage of what you have. Rhode Island is a coastal state, and we're near a big offshore wind resource. So it makes sense to build some offshore wind.
Right.
And it makes sense to supplement it with some other energy resources. So I think taking advantage of your geographic strength is a really, really smart thing. It's what we've seen states in the Southwest do, where states like Arizona and California investing huge in solar because they've got a tremendous solar resource.
Right.
And so and Washington State has tremendous hydroelectric resources. So taking advantage of your geographic strengths makes a whole lot of sense. And don't try to fit a square peg in a round hole. And I think playing to your strengths is something that Rhode Island has been doing of late,
And
at least
do
in
we
the
have
energy
enough,
business.
Political support? I mean, is sort of the infrastructure of government decision making as leveraged as it needs to be?
I think Rhode Island has done a good job, frankly, over the last several administrations in continuing to push forward this new stuff. And that's not always easy to do when you're in government to push new ideas,
Right.
Especially ideas that might take more than one election cycle
Yeah, right.
to come to fruition. So I think folks in Rhode Island deserve a lot of credit. A number of administrations, going back to Governor Kachiri, Governor Chafee, and now Governor Raimondo, all who have supported this concept of what will the energy structure for Rhode Island look like 5, 10, and 20 years from now? How can we support it?
How energy self-sufficient, independent could
Yeah.
Rhode Island viably be? I mean, it's not going to get 100% energy
No.
independent, but could it get to 50%?
I think we have an offshore wind resource close to Rhode Island that is more than Rhode Island can use. Mm-hmm. So I think there's an opportunity for Rhode Island to continue to invest in it and export that energy. Now, other neighboring states also have big wind resources. So I do think we're going to see a large percentage of Rhode Island, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. They're going to get a large percentage of their energy needs from offshore wind. It's not going to be a majority. It's going to be a large percentage of it, though.
That's great. Anything else you want to say as you get ready to lounge and cavort and consume during these next few weeks of the summer?
Well, I'm as I said, I'm looking forward to my first good Rhode Island summer in at least 11 years without any merger.
Favorite beach?
Without any merger transactions or anything like that going on. I do like to go down to the Ocean Mist.
Yeah, down to the Ocean Mist?
Yeah.
Okay, Ocean Mist. Best seaside food?
Yeah.
You kind of rustic.
Monahan's in Narragansett
Yeah.
for clam cakes and chowder.
Yeah.
Last
I have a pet
last
peeve.
time I was in there, I ran into Governor Kachiri.
So I have
right
a
there.
pet peeve
Yeah.
that there has been a dilution
Yeah.
of the amount of clams in clam cakes, and I think I'll talk to Governor, the Speaker,
Yeah.
about that being a crime. Like if you're gonna have a clam cake, you gotta have clams.
There's a
in your
minimum
clam.
percentage.
There's got to be a minimum.
And
percentage.
perhaps we can have an inspector go around and.
There should
yeah.
be minimum
You're
amount.
you're volunteering to be DBR's clam inspector.
Everybody's talking about cutting regulation. This is a regulation that needs to be pushed
I think a
forward.
lot of people would support that.
I
Josh.
think
Yeah.
so as
Yeah.
well. Listen, congratulations
Thank you, sir.
on this incredible success. It's, as all of us entrepreneurs try and develop these things and build these things, success does not go straight
No,
up and
no.
to the right. It goes up and down.
And you've got to stick with it.
And you've got to have an idea, and you've got to have some patience with your partners,
Right.
and you've got to be vibrant and vigilant on developing these things. And this is as good a hit as anybody's had in Rhode Island, certainly in my lifetime.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah,
Much
really
appreciated.
appreciate it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're going to be back in about 10 minutes with Gary Sass, the money man, talking about everything from education to budget to what's going on down in Washington, D.C. We'll be back in about 10. Thank you.